All right, guys, we're going to get rocking and rolling here in a matter of moments. A lot to cover on today's program. We got a new potential buyer for the Charlottesville Daily Progress. It's a hedge fund, and that's not good for the community. We'll tell you why a hedge fund buying the Daily Progress is not good for the Charlottesville and Central Virginia community. An activist investor is pursuing ownership of Lee Enterprises, the parent company of the Charlottesville Daily Progress. We'll talk about that today on the I Love CVille show. Chief Brackney has given City Hall until Friday to meet her demands, or she will take the jurisdiction to court and sue. Again, Chief Brackney has given City Hall until Friday to meet her demands, or she will sue the City of Charlottesville. She's demanding $3 million. You heard me correctly. We'll talk about that today on the program, why you would choose Black Friday as the threshold is beyond me. We'll talk about this on today's program. Virginia football is a favorite against Virginia Tech on Saturday. We'll take a look at that game. The Who's, this game means quite a bit to all of us, as we all know. We'll see what we have to do to get a victory against a struggling Virginia Tech football program. The Wahoo basketball team got its best win of the season against Georgia last night. They're in action on national television against Providence today at 7:30. Providence is a 2-point favorite. We'll talk about that hoops ball game. We'll also talk about the future for Bronco Mendenhall's staff, and Alex Erpy will join us in the program. Fox's Cafe, the land that is home to Fox's Cafe, continues to be on the market. $1,495,000 asking price for a prime piece of commercial real estate, just under 0.4 acres. So much to cover on the show. Give it a like, give it a share. We'll get rocking and rolling. Judah Wickower, I'm ready to rock and roll when you're ready. Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you so much for joining us on a glorious Tuesday. We are live in Charlottesville, across Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille network. Today, presented by IMBS Inc. IMBS was formed on a few simple principles to provide quality, dependable, and affordable medical billing to all practitioners. IMBS, locally owned and operated. Its founder, Ida Thornton, an entrepreneur of talented proportions. IMBS takes pride in having certified professional coders, certified pediatric coders, and certified medical billing specialists on its roster. IMBSinc.com. A lot to cover on today's program. Chief Brackney has issued a threshold, a window of opportunity, a deadline, if you may, of Black Friday. The day after Thanksgiving, the police chief has set as her demand deadline and her quest for $3 million in damages. If she doesn't get a check for $3 million from Charlottesville City Hall, she will sue the jurisdiction she formerly represented as police chief. We'll take a deep dive into a Black Friday deadline for Chief Rochelle Brackney on the I Love CVille show. The Daily Progress, once again, is potentially in the hopper. This time, Alden Global Capital, a hedge fund, has made an offer to acquire Lee Enterprises, the parent company of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, the Roanoke Times, the Lynchburg News and Advance, and of course, of the Charlottesville Daily Progress. Lee Enterprises owns more than 70 newspapers. Alden Global Capital is a hedge fund that already has a 6% equity stake in Lee Enterprises. It's not good for local communities when hedge funds start assuming or taking over control of newspapers. We will explain why. Remember, I previously worked for the Daily Progress, coming out of college at the University of Virginia, the youngest editor in its history of the Daily Progress I was. We will take a look at hedge fund Alden Global Capital and how it could negatively impact the Charlottesville and Central Virginia community by acquiring our paper of record. The land that is home to Fox's Cafe and the adjacent parcel of land is currently on the market for sale. $1,495,000, about half of what Chief Rashal Brackney is demanding from the city of Charlottesville, can get you a prime parcel of real estate in our fair city. Just under 0.4 acres, this commercial property is zoned B2. It's highly visible. It's fronting Avon Street and Levy Avenue, and it has 2 additional Avon Street front parcels. It's being sold as is. It's a short walk to downtown, to Belmont, to Ix Park. Yes, in the short term, you will have to deal with the negative ramifications of Belmont Bridge construction. Regardless, this is premium property waiting for somebody to purchase. We'll take a deep dive into this land on the program. Alex Urpy will join us. Judah, when he does, if you could have him sit over there in our green room, that would mean the world to me. Tonight, Virginia basketball, back-to-back nights of national television. Esta Noche against Providence. Providence, a 2-point favorite, tip-off 7:30 ESPN2. Virginia beat Georgia last night in its best win of the season. I'll tell you something. Mr. Franklin, this transfer from Indiana, looks like he has star-making written all over him. I have said on the show since the Navy game that Armaan Franklin would be our best player on the roster. I have said the ECU transfer, Mr. Gardner, would be our second best player on the roster, Jaden Gardner. And I have said since the Navy game that we need a third scorer to rise to the occasion. We may potentially have a third impact player prime to boom and blossom. We'll explain who and why on today's Tuesday edition of the I Love CVille show. I also want to take a look at the Virginia Tech football game. The Wahoos are an early 7-point favorite here at Scott Stadium. UVA 3:45 kickoff, ACC Network on Saturday. What's the future for Bronco Mendenhall and his coaching staff? I'm a huge Bronco Mendenhall fan. Huge fan of Bronco Mendenhall. That being said, it's obvious to all of us that changes on this coaching staff must happen, and must happen very soon. A lot to cover on today's program. Tink Fiber Internet, the crazy fast internet behind the I Love CVille network. Skooma Boutique Dispensary in the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. Skooma Boutique Dispensary on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall next to Rapture. The best dispensary for your CBD and Delta 8 needs. Guys, I think we need to start with Rashal Brackney's demands. $3 million. City better pay up or we will sue you. Chief Brackney's attorney, Charles Tucker, of the late, great Johnny Cochran law firm, hosts a press conference a little while ago and pretty much says to the city of Charlottesville, give us money or we will litigate. Give us jack or we will sue. Give us coin or we will take you to court. The asking price is $3 million, or a lawsuit is on the horizon. The deadline is Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. So while some will be sleeping in and managing a Thanksgiving food hangover, while others will be shopping for deals and discounts on the top shopping day of the season, of the year, a handful within the Charlottesville jurisdiction will be watching closely as lawyer Charles Tucker tick-tocks the time by. A game of chess, a game of chicken, two speeding vehicles heading toe-to-toe down Ivy Road, 50 miles an hour, a collision on the horizon. Who will blink first? Will it be the city of Charlottesville? Will it be Rachel Brackney? $3 million is on the line, a big bag of money. And if the city doesn't pay up, litigator Charles Tucker will take our jurisdiction, a town we love, to court. This is not a pretty situation. You look at it, both parties are losers. Chief Brackney, she's not going to get $3 million. She'll get something, but it's not going to be $3 million. And Chief Brackney is pretty much, who was it, Judah? Was it Pontius Pilate who sold his soul for some gold? Who was it? It was Judas. How much gold?
They usually say 30 silver.
30 silver.
Who knows what's worth back in?
For 30 pieces of silver, Judas sold Jesus and his soul to the devil. For a bag of $3 million, she hopes Chief Brackney will take a professional career and potentially tarnish it forevermore. Who will hire a police chief that falls out of favor with local government? Who will hire a police chief that sues a jurisdiction that employs her? And is the $3 million asking price even enough when she's young and has so much of her career in front of her? Let's cut to the chase. The city of Charlottesville also gets egg on its face. At a time when it has city manager turnover left and right, attrition to say the least, at a time when its mayor is comparing the town she represents to male ejaculatory fluid and to rape, at a time when council is so restless and so ornery and so antagonistic, it might as well be Jack and Cricket and Victor from Young and the Restless instead of Heather and Lloyd and Nakaya from City Council. Charlottesville once again is in the headlines for reasons we do not want to be. This time, the CEO of a police department is suing potentially the jurisdiction, alleging discrimination based on race and because she's a female. Her employment contract was terminated on September 1 by Mr. Chip Boyles. He has since landed at another job. Chief Brackney, when this is all said and done, may not be so lucky to land at another gig. Black Friday, the deadline. We are Wednesday, Thursday, less than 72 hours away from doomsday. I urge the city to pay Brackney a fraction of the $3 million hush money, go away money. Sign a non-disclosure agreement, take pennies on the dollar, and never mention the name Charlottesville ever again. That's the best remedy for an ugly, messy situation. That is called collateral damage management. And that's what must be done right now. Our next topic, the daily progress on the chopping block yet again. Alden Global Capital is a hedge fund. Alden Global Capital already owns 6% of Lee Enterprises stock. Lee Enterprise is the parent company of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, the Roanoke Times, the Lynchburg News and Advance, and of course the Charlottesville Daily Progress. Lee Enterprises purchased the Daily Progress and its sister publications from Warren Buffett's newspaper company. The first job I held coming out of the University of Virginia was as a staff writer at the Charlottesville Daily Progress. Before I left the newspaper, I was the youngest editor in the history of the newspaper, commanding a staff of 12 as a hardworking, precocious, and somewhat mischievous 25-year-old. 24-year-old maybe. When I was working in the Daily Progress, fresh out of school, my starting salary was $10 an hour. I worked holidays, I worked nights, and I worked weekends. I routinely left the newspaper at 1:15, 1:30 in the morning. I worked every Friday, Saturday, and most Sunday evenings. Holidays, expected to be in the newsroom. The life of a journalist, the life of a newspaper man and a newspaper woman is far from sexy. It's not what you see on TV. Sure, you get a little vanity and a little bit of an ego boost seeing your byline on the front page. Then you eventually realize the pay is crap, the hours are worse, and people do not respect the work that you do. Alden Global Capital is a hedge fund, notorious for cutting costs and trimming fat. Alden Global Capital is an activist investor. They sent a letter on Monday to Lee's board of directors. They offered to buy the rest of available stock for $24 a share, totaling around $141 million in cash. Alden said it would complete the acquisition in 4 weeks. If Alden Global Capital purchases the Daily Progress, here's who will suffer. You will suffer. I will suffer. Our community will suffer. The paper of record will become even more of a shadow of its former self, a skeleton crew of fresh out of college reporters. Longtime staff, people that have been on the payroll for decades, will be jettisoned for cheaper talent that will be expected to do more for less. Alden Global Capital is bad news bears. And if you want a representation of what I'm talking about, look at what hedge fund Alden Global Capital has done to the Daily Press of Hampton Roads and the Virginia Pilot of Virginia Beach and Norfolk. I grew up reading the Daily Press. Now you pick up that newspaper, it is a shadow of its former self, thin as can be. We cross our fingers and we hope that this does not come to fruition. Let's get to real estate news. I follow this closely. For $1,495,000, $1,495,000, half of what Chief Rachel Brackney is demanding, you can purchase 403 Avon Street, a handful of parcels on Avon, home to the former Fox's Cafe. The owner of Fox's retired, now the land for sale. 0.38 acres. Zone B2 with tremendous visibility fronting Avon and Levy Avenue. 2 additional parcels on Avon. This piece of property is a short walk to the downtown mall, to Belmont, and to Ix Park. Some of the B2 by right options include 45-foot height multifamily, 1 to 21 dwellings per acre. Did you hear me? Commercial, also an option. Retail, an option. You can build a tiny apartment or condo complex here. In the short term, you're going to have to deal with the collateral damage that is Belmont Bridge construction. The Belmont Bridge, I've been in this town for 21 years, has been a topic of conversation for more than the time I've been in Seaville. Finally, we're seeing the work slowly come to fruition. You buy the land, you suffer through the Belmont Bridge, but when the bridge is finished, you got a gold mine here. $1,495,000 asking price for a piece of property that is screaming apartments or condos with their close proximity to Ix, to downtown Charlottesville, and to Belmont, and the amenities associated with those jurisdictions. Let's talk football. In a minute, the future of Bronco Mendenhall and his coaching staff. Before we get to that, Virginia Tech at UVA, Saturday, ACC Network, 3:45 kickoff. The Wahoos are a 7-point favorite. I feel good about this game. Brennan Armstrong looked like the best quarterback on the field against Pittsburgh. Brennan Armstrong's ribs look healthy. I didn't say perfect. I said healthy. This Virginia football team is going to score points. And if it's special teams, led by assistant coach Ricky Brumfield, and if it's defense, led by defensive coordinator Nick Howell, can show up even mediocrely, Virginia should beat Virginia Tech and head into the bowl season with a lot of confidence. Bronco Mendenhall is catching a lot of heat as the ball coach here at Scott Stadium. Bronco Mendenhall should return as head football coach at UVA. I understand the last few games, BYU, Notre Dame, and Pittsburgh have not gone as we've wanted. I understand we had a chance to win the Coastal Division and playing in an ACC championship. I understand our defense has been putrid, and that's saying it nicely. I understand adjustments and in-game coaching decisions have left a lot of people scratching their head and saying, Bronco, what are you doing? Folks, it's been a while since Bronco Mendenhall. It's been a while since Virginia football has been relevant. Remember the Mike London era? Remember the end of the Al Groh era? This football team struggled for an identity and was routinely in the cellar of the division. Now we're competing for division championships, and the expectation is to play in the ACC championship. That's a reflection of the coach. That being said, I think it's time to make a change at defensive coordinator. Nick Howell, I hate to say this, has probably got to go. I have yet to see a defense that is bad as this in the time I've been following Virginia football. Can you think of one Virginia defense that is as bad as the 2021 defense we call Wahoo football? I cannot. Nick Howell, probably he's got a game and the bowl game left as defensive coordinator. Ricky Brumfield, he's better get some resumes circulating as well, the special teams coordinator. Special teams was undoubtedly a tremendous concern against Pittsburgh. You make some adjustments with the coaching staff on defense and special teams, and you got a ball club that again could contend for a Coastal Division championship next year. And I think Virginia, a 7-point favorite, is going to beat Virginia Tech on Saturday at 3:45 in Scott Stadium. Time will tell. But the crystal ball's been on point for much of the campaign and much of the 2021 year. Basketball, before we get to Alex Erpy. Virginia got a much-needed victory against the Georgia Bulldogs last night on national television. It was Virginia's best win of the season by far. Virginia has got some talent on this roster. And that talent starts with Armaan Franklin. The Indiana transfer is a baller. The dude can score from downtown. He can attack the rack off the dribble. He shoots at a high clip at the stripe, and his mid-range game is bona fide. Armaan Franklin is the best player on the roster. With the team that lacks scoring depth, with the team that lacks a number of scoring options, Armaan Franklin's going to have to be special many evenings for Virginia to get victories. That being said, I really like the potential of some of the guys on the roster. Mr. Shedrick, this big man in the center, this guy has so much upside. His scoring and his offensive productivity is a work in progress. But what he does on the defensive side of the ball should not go unnoticed. Caden Shedrick had 4 blocks last night against Georgia, 7 rebounds against Georgia. He intimidated and altered a number of shots that don't count as blocks in the box score. Caden Shedrick, I certainly think could be the third scoring option. Number 1, Armaan Franklin. Number 2, Jaden Gardner, the ECU transfer. Number 3, Caden Shedrick. This guy runs the floor well. This guy plays on the block well. This guy can finish around the rack well. I said at the beginning of the season that Caden Shedrick reminded me of a more skilled, more athletic, more gifted Jack Salt. I'm going to adjust that comparison. Caden Shedrick reminds me of a longer and taller Mamadi Diakite with more upside. Diakite, 6'8", 6'9", freakish athleticism. But when you're 6'8", 6'9", and you're not super muscular, your upside from a professional basketball standpoint is a little bit limited. That's why you've seen Diakite float around the league and not really latch on with the team. He's out now with an injury. Shedrick is physical. He's long, a wingspan of 7'4", 7'5". Jumps, finishes at the rack, and has an innate ability for shot blocking. No one wants to put too much pressure on Caden Shedrick, but this is an NBA prospect waiting to happen. An NBA prospect waiting to happen in Caden Shedrick. I would love if he was the third scoring option to complement Armaan Franklin and Jaden Gardner. I would love if Caden Shedrick, much like I would love if Mr. Francisco Cafaro, limited foul trouble. They get too many ticky-tack fouls. And when Cafaro and Shedrick get into foul trouble, our front court is limited. Look, it's a basketball team that has obvious issues. The centerpiece of a recruiting class a handful of years ago was Casey Morsell. He's now an impact player at NC State. He transferred. The centerpiece of a recruiting class 2 years ago was Abdul Rahim. Guess what? He's playing basketball for Georgia and was an impact player last night for the Bulldogs. When you lose a Casey Morsell and an Abdul Rahim to transfer, you have guys like Carson McCorkle playing important minutes. You have guys like Cody Statman playing important minutes. You have first years like Igor Milicic playing important minutes. Morsell and Abdul Rahim could offer more to this club than a Statman, McCorkle, or Milicic. Tony is playing the hand that is dealt. And there's no coach in Virginia that gets more out of his team than Tony Bennett. These boys got a true test tonight with Providence of the Big East. Providence are a 2-point favorite, 7:30 tip, ESPN2. We're going to learn a lot about this ball club against Providence tonight on national television. We'll get Alex Erpy in the mix, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services, on the show. This gentleman, smart man, we call him the Antonio Banderas of finance, the star of Today y Mañana co-star, Xavier Yerpi. You're also a star, my friend. Thursdays at 10:15 on the I Love Seville Network. Their show off this Thursday because they're going to be spending time with their family on Thanksgiving, my friend. What are the holidays at the Erpies like?
I always enjoy Thanksgiving. It's one of my favorite holidays. Nice to see you.
Nice to see
Happy
you as
Thanksgiving.
well.
We kind of relax. We take it easy. We enjoy our Thanksgiving feast. And then we always watch, one of our traditions is we always watch the old black and white Miracle on 34th Street film for Thanksgiving. Because that movie starts at the Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Okay.
Is the beginning of that movie. The old version with Maureen O'Hara. And so that's the one we watch. So we always watch that together as a family on Thanksgiving.
Who eats the most food in the Erpy house?
Ooh, you've got 3 boys
I mean, you guys all devour
who
food.
all devour food and love food. And my dad can put in more in there than you would think.
Xavier's a slim and trim
He's
gentleman.
a slim and trim guy, but he can put it in there. It just disappears. Like he eats a bunch, then he goes outside for a couple hours to do his garden, and he loses 5 pounds. So that's just the way he is. His metabolism runs at like 100 miles an hour.
Xavier Yerpe has the metabolism of Mariano Rivera. He is the closer indeed.
Yep.
All right, Alex Yerpe, my friend. Let's begin with some chop of late. We had some chop in the markets yesterday.
It's a little tumultuous.
We had some chop. We have some chop in the market today. Rates are going up, and it's putting a strain on some of these tech firms. You want to start there with that topic.
In particular, tech has really struggled the last couple of days. Zoom has really struggled. That share price is in half from where it was just weeks, maybe a month or so ago.
Just to be expected, though, right?
Which is kind of expected. This is always the challenge that you have with tech stocks, right? Because you're not really basing the share price of tech stocks a lot of times. It's not so much based on current sales, but on projections. And so, because you're looking at technologies that will come into play year or two down the line. So last year happened, Zoom takes off because the theory is, well, we're all going to be Zooming for the foreseeable future. The revenues will just keep going up. Before you know it, every company is going to be having people working from home. And then what happens is a year later, you're sitting there saying, well, yeah, Zoom took off last year, but the growth has slowed. And so the analysts begin to look at the stock and say, well, is the price of this stock match now where we think Zoom is going to be in 5 years? And if it doesn't, then the share price has to come down.
Your brother Nicholas Erpe, the social media ninja CMO of Emerging Financial Services, is zinging your dad. He says Xavier Yerpe is far from slim and trim. And I responded by saying, no way, Jose. Xavier Yerpe is slim and trim.
He is. My dad's in good shape. He's the youngest 65-year-old guy.
Yeah, he's got a zest for life.
He does. He has a zest for life.
I may make the argument that Xavier Yerpe, of the Yerpe men, may be the slimmest and trimmest.
Probably. He's you know what he does? He always has this energy. He's the only person. You know how sometimes people dread getting older?
Yeah.
They look at 65 as like, oh my goodness, now I'm old and things like that. My dad was like, no, this is great. I did the senior discount at the movie theater. I get to go all these places where everything's cheaper. And because he still has the energy. Because it's about whether you're young at heart.
Well, when you immigrate from Cuba to America and you realize that the world is your oyster, after growing up in Cuba and then coming to America and then he got into the bonds game first, right?
He did.
Does memory serve right?
He did.
Got into the bonds game. Now the man is running a financial firm, one of the best in the community with his sons. You got a lot to be thankful for.
Exactly. And it's all about the insiders. Whether if you're young at heart, you're young forever.
Michael wins the slim and trim.
Michael?
That's what Nick says.
He's in good shape too, Mike.
Yeah?
He's always been.
Michael Erpe's throwing
He's also another
he's throwing up the bench
guy.
press a lot?
So Nick does the bench press.
Nick Erpe, you bench.
Nick is Mr. Bench Press. Michael is just endlessly active. So baseball, football, tennis, basketball. We don't hoop in the backyard. He's just endlessly active. But Nick is Mr. Bench Press. He can routinely. When I do arm wrestle with him, I'm done in about like 5 seconds.
Who is the strongest of the Erpe kids?
Nick.
Nick?
Oh yeah.
So if there was WrestleMania, Nick would win?
No, Mike would probably win. He's more agile. More agile. Agility is important in wrestling. Having watched it for the first time in Olympic wrestling this year, I realized if you can slip out, you're in great shape.
Nick Erpe is not going to like that you just claimed Michael Erpe was going to win the set. Nick says I bench. It doesn't show, but I bench. Best Buy, the electronics retailer, saw its shares plummet more than 16% after delivering a holiday comparable sales forecast that was largely below those of Wall Street analysts. Best Buy, how do you look at this stock here? I look at Best Buy. We expected a lot of people to make electronics purchases as they were quarantining and staying at home, and a lot of people did. There's tremendous competition in this space. Best Buy, much like Macy's is doing, is trying to create this like omni shopping experience where it compartmentalizes its digital platform away from its brick and mortar platform. So Macy's now is trying to take digital,
The idea of Macy's, but
and separate it from the store
yes.
to increase valuation and essentially build almost two different companies. What are your thoughts on Best Buy?
It's a challenge because I think Best Buy's appeal in years past was if you're buying a heavy duty laptop, if you're buying a computer, you kind of want to see it before you go purchase it. I think that is beginning to change. I think people are becoming much more comfortable purchasing those classic, almost like what Zappos did for shoes. Like there was a time when people said, no, I can't possibly purchase a shoe online because how do I know if it fits?
Or Warby Parker with eyeglasses?
Exactly. But over time, things change and people are more willing to do these things. And I've just seen the deals that you can find on laptops and computers, purely online shopping experience, now rival some of the things you can find at Best Buy. Now, I'll be honest, when I needed a new laptop, I went there because I'm still a little old-fashioned. Maybe I want to look at my laptop before I order it from online, but trend-wise, you see people more willing to just say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to order this online and see how it is. Because it's very easy for me to return it.
Are you bullish on the future of Best Buy?
Well, that's a tough question. I still think it has some potential. I think it will still be around. I think there's enough of what it sells, and this is kind of anecdotal, when I go in there, I still see a pretty decently full parking lot, the one here, and a pretty decent number of people inside that store. And so my suspicion is that there will always be sort of a remnant. And I think as much as last year drove a lot of people online, I wonder if people will get a little bit of like online fatigue. Because there are some stores that are now, right now it's more concentrated in luxury goods and so forth, but they're kind of bringing back the brick and mortar experience because they're saying, well, maybe you want to experience something in my store rather than just buy something and have it show up at your doorstep. So I think if Best Buy can sort of go down that road, I'm a little surprised that the Macy's, I think, messed up a while ago in terms of not really capitalizing on the fact that they had such a
Macy's
historic...
stock has popped of late.
I know, but where I'm getting at is that Macy's had massive real estate.
Yeah.
And especially with their flagship store in New York. And they redesigned the entire interior and turned what could have been some place you wanted to go to see what it looked like in the old days into the same as every other Macy's store. And so you said that I think they need a little more to capitalize on that nostalgic feel that you can have with the store, because now it just looks the same as every other. Macy's stores tend to look the same as every other store out there.
I'll tell you, if you guys want to see the best omni-experiential retail experience, go to Animal Connection in X Park. She has got self-serve dog washes.
Whoa.
She has got dog grooming. She has got dog training. She's considering building a member dog park. She's got educational classes. She's got educational classes surrounding around health and diet of your animal. You go there and you get a value proposition that you cannot find online.
Exactly.
And that is how retail is going to survive.
That's the key. Retail to no longer survive in terms of saying my shopping is offering you a better deal than online. Retail survives by saying my experience, the experience you will have at my brick and mortar store is superior to the experience of sitting at your computer at home and clicking a button. That's where retail will survive.
Alex Erpe is our guest, guys, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. Let me throw this to you. Jerome Powell. Ooh, you got a scoff here. He's got something to say. President Joe Biden picks Jerome Powell to lead the Fed for a second term as the United States battles not only COVID, but inflation. Powell, a second term as Federal Reserve Chair, is going to put forth. First, let me get out of your way here before I ask questions. What do you make of Biden picking Powell for a second term? Because I got pointed questions for you.
He kind of had to. The other alternative that he was looking at kind of stuck her foot in her mouth when she couldn't figure out whether she was a capitalist or a socialist.
You're talking Brainerd?
Yeah, and you kind of don't want that for your head of your Federal Reserve, that you can't even decide whether this market system is appropriate or not.
Well, I would hope that the head of the Federal Reserve is not a socialist.
That's what you would hope.
Okay, I mean...
Exactly. So, I mean, that was a major red flag. So he kind of had no choice after that. I would hope that he didn't contemplate that. And then went with Powell, which is kind of your safe bet.
I mean, you don't think Powell's done a good job?
My dad and I have long-standing issues with the way the Federal Reserve is run.
Or interest rates?
Interest rates.
Yeah.
Mainly. Well, the stimulus money is in many ways beyond his control.
Okay.
Right? Fiscal policy, whether Congress chooses to spend $4 trillion, is not within the ability of Powell to control.
Keeping rates low is his control.
He kept rates low, right? Well, we have issues between spiking rates 8 times and then dropping them again, only to then keep them extremely low. We know why he's doing it, but again, any chairman probably would have been doing the same thing that he's doing, but that doesn't make it correct, if that makes sense.
Sure.
In other words, we know that the Federal Reserve has reasons why that they do not want to raise rates, whether it's appropriate or not.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you've
identified them well. It's the debt.
Exactly, it's the debt.
Yeah.
It's the debt. And so he's just been going along with that. He hasn't been, I don't think he's been better or worse than any other type that you would put into that spot. So that's just the way they're operating now.
So you're basically saying, I don't want to assume, you're saying his insistence on keeping rates low are why we're in this supply chain inflationary period that's left those living on the margin struggling even more than perhaps they did prior to the pandemic.
I wouldn't say the cause.
Okay.
What concerns us is that the Federal Reserve has this philosophy that lately that they have been targeting, because this isn't a 2020 thing. The Federal Reserve under Powell, since they abandoned the idea of raising rates in 2018, has been on this notion that they have desired greater inflation for years now. So 2019, they still wanted higher inflation. They were targeting higher inflation. And Xavier and I have this issue where we have an issue with a major bank like the Federal Reserve, which controls monetary policy, targeting a policy which hurts the average person most of all. In other words, my dad and I just sit there and say there really is no scenario in which the government should be desiring inflation. And the Federal Reserve made it clear that they were targeting higher inflation even before the pandemic happened. And so that's more where our issues lie. The pandemic is an outlier here, what we're seeing supply chain wise is, as we've discussed, somewhat external. I don't think the Federal Reserve is the cause of the supply chain crisis. But I think there's no denying that the inflation that we were seeing, it's not out of hand now, but the inflation that we were seeing when it was rising 2-3% was entirely in line with what they wanted to happen.
How would you characterize or grade President Biden's, we're about 11 months in? Mm-hmm. 11 months in, his first 11 months, from a Wall Street perspective.
From a Wall Street perspective, Wall Street is pretty happy right now. From a mainstream, exactly. Yeah. From a Main Street economic perspective, I think it has left a lot to be desired. The supply chain issue has not been resolved in all this time. There really doesn't. Today confuses me even more. So if you've heard today, they're going to tap the Strategic Oil Reserve to supposedly help alleviate gas prices.
So let's put that in perspective. Releasing more oil increase supply
From a reserve.
From a
So
reserve.
they're not producing more. They have a bunch.
Already
that's
there.
already there.
You're going to
and they're
flood the
going-
market with more.
They're attempting to flood. And you sit there and you look at this and you say, well, what's the issue that we have here with oil? Is it that demand has skyrocketed beyond 2020 levels? Not really. Global demand is nowhere near what it was pre-pandemic, right? So we don't have this crazy, insane, temporary glut of demand. What we have is a lack of supply. There was less supply than there was to meet that demand. And so you sit there and you say, and you should notice it in the price of oil, which dropped temporarily and then went right back up, because the oil market is not stupid. It looked and said, well, he's temporarily releasing this oil from the strategic reserve, which will then run out, and then if you don't produce any more oil, the prices will rise again. And so the market sat there and said, first the price came down a little, and then everyone said, well, wait a second, price is just going to go up again once this is over. So then price went up again today. And so you sit there and you say, on the one hand, you're releasing oil from reserves, so you're clearly saying there's not enough oil in the market. But on the other hand, I mean, your only other policy in this vein is to try to get OPEC to produce more oil, which they're never going to do. So you sit there and say, why didn't you just spur on some oil production earlier in the year to not reach this point? So it's just, a lot of it is a little confusing. The messaging is very confusing sometimes. And so Main Street-wise, I think there's left a lot to be desired. Wall Street-wise, I mean, the market, as much as the last 2 days have worried us, the market is up this year.
The U.S. will release 50 million barrels of crude from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The White House said that today. And the move is a coordinated effort, as you smile for this camera, and Judah Wickower here. The move is a coordinated effort between energy-consuming nations, including China and Japan, to try to combat the increase in energy prices. Do we not think, and help me understand here, you're the pro, I just learned from you. Do we not think come January, come February, as demand subsides some with the holidays behind us, that we're going to have a drop in gas prices, that we're going to have inflation get back into check, and things are going to be a little bit fatter in the wallet for a lot of us? Do you disagree with that?
Gas-wise, I do disagree.
You do?
Only because and my dad has gone over this, we even did it on Today Mañana a little bit. If you look at demand for gasoline, it is well below 2019, early 2020 levels. So you sit there and say, well, demand, we're in trouble if demand does not return to 2019, 2020 levels. That means that you're talking, if that goes on for a long time, that's recession, right? So we're in trouble if demand does not increase back to those levels. And yet prices of gasoline are far higher now than they were at the end of 2019, pre-pandemic, early 2020, so January 2020. And so you sit there and say, this is not a demand issue. Right? What we're seeing is not an issue that demand has somehow skyrocketed in the last 2 years. Demand is below where it was. And so I don't want to be going into next year. If we're going into next March and April and demand for oil is still below 2019 demand for oil.
Don't you think it will be?
Well, I mean, that would be bad if it is.
Yeah,
because that means the global economy is slowing down significantly.
But can't we make the legitimate argument that now versus 2019, there are more electric vehicles. Now versus 2019, there's an opportunity to work more from your house than to drive to work. Now versus 2019, there's less need for business travel.
Not as significant as the gap that we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, as much as electric vehicles have grown, they have not grown to close that gap. That gap is
How about vehicle travel,
global supply
business
chains.
travel, unwillingness to travel in general for fear of a pandemic?
That could be some of it, but those things you would kind of want to end. In other words, those fear of travel, fear of business travel, fear of going out because of the pandemic have negative repercussions beyond depressing the price of gas.
Sure.
So if those persist into March and April, what I'm saying is then you are looking at the possibility of recession there, because you do not want people 2 years into a pandemic to still be curtailing their movement.
Unless the spending, and two guys shoot
Yeah.
the you know what here. Unless the spending just changes in how the dollars are spent. I mean, how the dollars could be spent now could be more, instead of brick and mortar, e-commerce. How the restaurant spending could be spent now instead of, restaurant dining could be Grubhub, delivery.
Grubhub would need gas. E-commerce, it needs to get to your door.
That's true.
And it's mostly by truck.
Yeah.
So I mean, the electronic spending still requires a lot of oil to run it right now. I mean, we still use trucks for most things. Most global supply chain things, when they are sent via shipping containers, they are running on some version of oil.
Are you
get there.
nervous about Q1 being soft?
I am a little nervous about Q1 being soft. Q4 is looking very soft.
Yeah.
Already. And Q1, it does concern us that it will be soft as well. We're not seeing really an uptick. And again, GDP wise, you gotta remember, we're maybe 96% of the way back from the V shape. If you want to look at it as a V, it's looking more like
Which 4% is substantial.
which 4% is substantial. That's the thing, right? It looks great because we were down 30, 60%. But if you said, Alex, from the beginning of 2020 to the end of 2021, GDP will drop 4%, that's the definition of a recession. We don't think of it that way because we hit such a low point last year, but you don't want to see that persist. And so the issue is that in order for us to close that gap, there's going to have to be an increase of demand, and that will put upward pressure from the demand side on oil. So the question is, what do you do on the supply side? And clearly, the renewables weren't quite there yet to make up this difference, because there's certain things that they just can't do.
So Steven says, does that mean we should be supporting or in favor of what Biden's trying to do from the infrastructure bill standpoint?
From infrastructure, well, infrastructure you always want to, there's a lot in the infrastructure bill. The portion that is spent on infrastructure itself, I think is at the $500 billion that go there. Obviously, that always supports the foundation of the economy. Those things are not problematic. That's kind of a different question in terms of what do you do. In other words, let's say you work on the infrastructure, you get the bridges, the roads, the highways, you do this. That's kind of a different question than what do you do in terms of the vehicles that people are driving on these highways, these bridges, and so forth. To the extent that they start going, and I correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there's massive amounts of rail or other types of public transportation in this infrastructure bill that's major. Usually those are done on a state to local level if you want to make those kinds of investments. In other words, move away from cars on the road to other forms of transportation. But most, in terms of the economy, in terms of things being delivered, most of that is still going to be done at some point by truck.
Alex Erpy, CEO of Merchant Financial Services. Which sectors are you excited about going into next year?
So for next year, we remain still, and I'm always still excited over the long term on new technologies. So as much as just as an example, as much as we talk about oil and the need for it and so forth, in our firm, we do have clients invested also in clean energy, just because over a 10 plus year perspective, that is the future you want, right? You don't want to be sitting here saying, yes, I need oil in perpetuity, right? So there's a difference between recognizing what we may need now and being excited about future technologies for the purpose of investment. So clean energy, we still think has a lot of potential over the next 10 years. We looked a lot at robotics. I'm doing broad, these are what you might call subsectors. So so the sector is tech,
okay.
But when you go beneath tech, right, you now have biotech. Very fascinating, powerful. I mean, biotech has had an okay year this year, NASDAQ Biotechnology Index, but so it may have a lot of potential going forward. Then you've got your robotics, they call it AI. Bless you.
Thank you.
They call it AI, but it's funny, I always argue with people over whether it really is artificial intelligence, but it just refers to those things which extreme computing power and the ability to have computer programs that sort of operate on their own. And then you've even got down the road there's even a little space that interests us. Just as a potential, and these are fascinating. When I talk about these kind of really interesting sectors, you have to be thinking with that 10 to 20 year horizon. In other words, a space ETF, they're out there. A space ETF you can't be sitting here saying, yes, I'm going to get massive returns in 2022 from a space ETF. There's not much going, it's all foundation building. These companies aren't sending spaceships there yet. They're building mining, they're doing the chips that will be necessary and so forth. But you need to those are your really long term. Your biotech is your 5 to 10 year window. Your clean energy, even clean energy, right? You sit there and say, all right, if you want to do like a battery company, like a Plug Power and so forth, you've got to be saying, do I believe in this for 10 years? Not do I believe in this for 12 months? Because if you were looking at Plug Power for 12 months, buying it in December of 2020 was a bad idea, right? But if you're looking at a clean energy for 10 years, then you're not going to be worried about 2021. You're not going to sit there and say, I'm going to bail on clean energy because it had a rough year. You're going to sit there and say, well, do I believe in this tech 10 years from now?
What do you think of this comment from Allison Janey? She says, how does Alex think the improved vaccination rates are going to help the economy?
So I think that's more a matter of comfort. In other words, the more people feel comfortable going out, and the extent to which being vaccinated helps people feel comfortable going out, which is clear, that I think improves the way things are looking economically. That seems to come down to me a lot to comfort level. Because we're seeing a lot of fluctuations. We're sort of at the point where it's hard to even predict how COVID cases will fluctuate depending on vaccination levels. I mean, the countries in the world are all over the place. So I'm not even a good enough statistician to be able to tell you how high vaccination correlates with caseload, right? But from an economic behavioral perspective, more vaccination, more comfort means more people going out, means hopefully more people spending money in local economies. So that's what you would hope to see as more of these come out.
What's the plan for today mañana as we head into December?
Today mañana, we've got a good number. So we've got a bunch of desks lined up for December. Our next one, so post Thanksgiving, our next guest is going to be Hope McCutcheon, I should say. And so she is a talent discoverer here. So we're really interested to talk with her because she runs a talent discovery business. And so we're going to talk with her a little bit about, what people are calling the Great Resignation, but just the ability of workers to move, what it looks like to recruit talent in this time. So she's a small business owner here, what that looks like, helping people connect businesses with talent, and to manage that. So that I think will be really interesting. And just as we go into the holidays today, we're still going to be featuring a lot of our small business owners. We just like to cover that and to really showcase all the things that are happening in Charlottesville, the fairs, the opportunities to spend locally, because that's really what it's all about, right? We talked about the macro issues, which have a serious impact. I mean, if you didn't believe in macroeconomics before this year, inflation has taught you to believe in macroeconomics now, right? So it has a major impact, but ultimately, it's going to be when people spending locally and trusting their local businesses that helps the local economy grow. That's what lifts up the Main Street, more so than anything that can be done at a Federal Reserve office building.
He is Alex Serpi, guys. He's the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. Today, y mañana is off this Thursday as we celebrate and give thanks with our families on Thanksgiving, but back a week from Thursday here in the I Love CVille Network. And we will see you Thursday, a week from Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving to your family.
Happy Thanksgiving. Same
Please
here.
Tell Nicholas, I see you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Please tell Michael and Xavier and Mrs. Erpe I said this.
Will do. Tell Mrs. Miller.
I will. And your special
son.
ladies.
Thank you.
Yes, I will. Thank you, my friend. And next time we see each other is going to be...
It'll be December.
It'll be December.
It'll be the last month of the year.
Actually, you and I will see each other on the 30th of November.
The 30th, okay.
The next time I see the Erpe clan will be December 2nd.
Will be December. So we'll squeak one more in there in November.
Good to see you. Good work.
Good to see you as always.
Thank you, guys. Alex Erpe, guys, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. He joins us on Tuesday here on the I Love CVille Network. Tomorrow is a good show. John McAllister is our guest. He is a documentarian, and he has got a documentary that's out on Bridge. John McAllister, our guest tomorrow, the producer of a Bridge documentary. a local, a squash player, someone who grew up in this area. Excited to introduce those that don't know Mr. John McAllister, Johnny Mac, on the program tomorrow, and to spotlight what I think is a super cool endeavor that he's done. He's passionate about the game bridge, and as a result of that passion, happy Thanksgiving, Alex. And as a result of that passion, the gentleman has created a documentary, and I'm looking it up right now, called Double Dummy. We'll spotlight Johnny Mac and his documentary tomorrow on the show. And of course, we'll talk Charlottesville, Virginia topics with a guy that's a jack of all trades. My name is Jerry Miller. This is the I Love Seville show. For Alex and Judah, thank you kindly for joining us. Back in the saddle tomorrow, off Thursday and Friday, as we are looking forward to spend some time with our family too. You guys have a good afternoon. Take care.